And joining us right now, the Rothman Orthopedics guest line, one of our favorites from Q&A, and obviously former Eagle safety as well. The Q of the Q&A, Quintin Mikell. What's going on there, Quintin?
What's going on? How you doing, man? Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely my foremost authority on defense. So much to get to in that regard, but I just for the people, help the young dads out there. You just went through a long car ride, about 14 hours with the family. You went to the game, you went to the Super Bowl, and then you guys trekked it back to Idaho?
Yep. Back to Boise right after the game. Well, in the morning. So we left pretty early, and it was supposed to be a 14-hour drive, but it turned out to like 16 for all the stops and the bathroom breaks and all that stuff.
How, three kids? Three kids?
Four.
Oh my
Two
God.
boys, 2 girls.
Holy pots and pans. You're a better man than I. You're a better. And what's your go? What are you listening to? When everyone else is watching the movies and all that stuff, what's Quintin Mikell's go-to pass the time on a long car trip?
Yeah, I keep my AirPods in, and I was listening to a lot of comedy shows, prank calls, stuff like that. And then I'll do every now and then I'll switch it to some sports talk, or I'll listen to some hip hop, anything to keep me from focusing on everything else that's going on outside of my car seat, my driver's seat. So
yeah. Some people like to frown upon the earbuds in that situation, but it's less distracting if you have them in as opposed to everything else that's going on. The show within a show. Within
exactly.
the car.
I keep it low enough so that I can still hear and I can still see all the drivers and listen to the drivers if anyone's honking their horn and stuff, but enough to where I can hear it and kind of phase out of that zone. So
good man. You know what? Head on a swivel, as always.
Absolutely.
So obviously it didn't end the way we wanted it to. Super Bowl 57, Quintin Mikell. What the heck happened in that second half exactly? Was it really a matter of chess versus checkers when it came to Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, and Jonathan Gannon, or was it the field? What the hell happened in that second half?
Yeah, man, I think it was a combination of all that, but honestly, the main thing was, Andy Reid, man. He came out. This Chiefs coaching staff has a lot of years of experience behind them, a lot of championships, a lot of winning behind them. They didn't panic. They knew what they had to do. They went in at halftime, and honestly, they just came out and out-coached the Eagles coaching staff the second half. And it also didn't help, some of the mistakes by especially the defensive secondary. Some of the mistakes were just kind of, you just kind of beat yourself, and so that's the most frustrating thing. It wasn't, it was part of it was coaching, but part of it was also, especially the secondary kind of beating themselves and making mistakes that helped the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm. When it came, I gotta jump to it. When it came to the motion, when it came to Darius Slay pointing emphatically to shift positions and have that defensive shift there in the secondary, and then a walk-in touchdown, whether it was Kadarius Toney, whether it was Sky Moore, whoever it was just it seemed like a constant thing they were able to do in that game to catch this defense off balance. Is that coaching? Is that poor communication? A little bit of everything. What happened on those plays in particular that looked like the Eagles defense was lost?
Well, the long story is, me personally, I think it's something that started earlier in the season and really started last year. And I think it goes back to, Gannon's refusal to really put the secondary in those type of positions. And, when you get to the marquee game, the Super Bowl, and you're asked the secondary to come up with a play in a defense that they don't play a whole lot in the red zone, this is what happens. This is why you take those advantages, you take those chances during the season, because now it's like extra practice in the game-like situation. So essentially what happened was, on the second one, the first one, everyone thinks that it was a zero blitz. It really wasn't a zero blitz. It was just man. It may have been a blitz, but it wasn't a zero blitz. You can see Maddox kind of pointing, and you can see Slay kind of pointing across because they're expecting Toney to run a jet sweep, which he's done a lot. And if you go back to the Jaguars game, I think the Jaguars kind of did some of the similar stuff. And they're expecting Toney to go across, so they're already kind of in their rotation. And the sad part is, the crazy part is, both guys were open. Toney was wide open, and so was Kelsey. So everyone was expecting that jet sweep, and they were going to, kind of rotate it to the other side, and that's not what happened. And the saddest part is, if Maddox would have just simply stayed where he was at and then just press and then take whoever was there, because you're not going to help on a jet sweep anyway. You're not going to help on anything on the other side of the field. Just let the play out and just stay where you're at, and the ball would have came right to him. So it's unfortunate. It's one of those things where I think if you had been practicing that all season, if you had been expecting that all season, they would have locked that down easily. But we never called those kind of coverages up into that game, and so yeah, it's frustrating.
So why would Jonathan Gannon call those plays? Simply because he thought that was something the defense needed to do against this offense, almost like making an adjustment going into the game?
That's a good question. I do know it was talked about on game day about Vic Fangio coming in, which I don't think he's had a whole lot of success against Andy. In those situations, I mean, you have to be able to play man. I personally wouldn't play man in the red zone just because of that. There's a lot of pick routes and crossing routes and stuff, and it's tough. But I personally think that these were situations where they had to get some pressure on Mahomes, and they had to get some tight coverage. And so it's just a kind of a hurricane, like a big mixture of a lot of bad stuff happening on one
Perfect
play.
storm. Perfect storm.
Perfect
okay.
storm.
The reason I asked that question, Quintin, is because for the life of me then, I couldn't figure out, and I can't figure out then from what you're telling me, why Jonathan Gannon would, I hate to use, be creative enough to make that adjustment going into this game, but not creative enough to make an in-game adjustment when he realized his front 4 or 5 could not make it home in blitzes, in pass rush, whatever. There was no adjustment made, it seemed like, from him to try to get after Patrick Mahomes and either force him into a mistake or actually, I don't know, somehow get a sack in this game.
Well, the tough part too is the first half, the Chiefs weren't on the field a whole lot. So there weren't a lot of opportunities to really tell if they were getting pressure, if they were going to be able to get there. And when you rely on this front, which has been getting home all season, and you get to the second half and then the adjustments are made, it's kind of too late. And so really it just came down to those 2 plays. That was the only 2 plays where it really affected in terms of the new calls and the new, the man and stuff. And so you're talking about 2 plays, and you're talking about a defensive front that's been getting home all season in the second half. So like I said, it just was like a lot of bad timing. And if it's like I said, if it's something you've never really practiced or never really done a whole lot of in game like situations, it's kind of tough to ask. It's kind of tough to really prepare for that. And so, like I said, I think they were prepared. I think they were expecting Tony to run a jet sweep and were really caught off guard. Because if you look on that touchdown when Tony scored, Maddox and Slay were both pointing, and both of them were inside of Kelsey in terms of the snap. So they were just expecting something different, and it's just frustrating.
Was it? Absolutely. I'm trying to put this in terms of the everyman. Was it like they tried to do too much, where they changed their own identity a little too much because of who the opponent was, or should they have stayed more of what they had done all season long?
I think so. I think that they, I don't know,
overthought it.
I think they overthought it. I think they overthought it in those situations. They were getting, the Chiefs the momentum was shifting. They had just had, I think it was right after the long return by Tony, right? Or was that the second one?
I think it was the second one.
Okay. And so I think they overcoached it. They overthought it. I think they had figured, they probably figured that they knew what the Chiefs were planning to do. And, it's tough, man. It's tough. Like, Andy Reid is a good play caller. We talked about it on Q&A, that if it came down to a tight game, if it came down to it, then the hand will go to, the tip of the hat will go to the Chiefs because of the experience. And I don't know. They just got out coached. It's tough, man. They got out coached and they got played on 2 or 3 plays, really, when you think about it. And that cost the game.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. No, I 100% agree. The other part of this now is that it's amazing how this works in the NFL. The guy who coached that defense, that did get out coached, granted by a great head coach and a great offensive coordinator and all that. So it wasn't like he was going up against sliced bread and it was terrible, Mm-hmm. You have a guy in Jonathan Gannon that now gets hired in that same stadium to take over the coaching reins of that same team. What are your thoughts on Jonathan Gannon now as a head coach?
He's got his work cut out for him. First of all, I don't know. It's hard for me when you're a head coach because there's so many different factors that come into play. I think he'll be a better head coach than a defensive coordinator. I'll put it that way. I think as a defensive coordinator, he played too soft. I think he played too worried about making mistakes. I think he did not. When you have this many great players on this defense, he should have taken more chances throughout the season and had these guys ready to go for the big game. And so that being said, I think he's going to be a good head coach. He seems like a very good, very smart, intelligent guy. I think he can motivate guys. I think guys will follow him. I think that's the most important thing, being a good leader. I think he'll be a good head coach. It all is going to come down to who he hires as coordinators and if he can get Kyler Murray on the same page with him. So I think he'll be fine. I think he's got his work cut out for him, though.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. When it comes to this defense and who's going to be sticking around, I mean, Fletcher Cox looks like he could be on his way out, while a guy like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, good old CD Deuce himself, looks like he could be sticking around for a lot more years. As a fellow safety, this is a guy that was playing the nickel position, hadn't played safety since college, came in and all of a sudden had more interceptions than he was tied for the league in interceptions. So what do you make of him? And do you, if you're Howie Roseman, bring him back?
I would absolutely bring him back. Man, he was rocking people out there. And I was, in the stands, I was like, okay, because that was the one thing. He has the athletic ability. He can cover. He can blitz. He can do a lot of things. But the physicality of coming up and making hits was what he was kind of lacking. And seeing his growth over the season, I think he's absolutely poised to be a star. And, he's still young. He's still in his prime. I would absolutely bring him back and start to build the secondary around him. And on another note on that, this is something that I've been kind of seeing with a lot of the comments, and not to sound negative, but a lot of what players are saying, it didn't happen this year, and you get that feel like it's almost like you get this feeling like, oh, we'll be back next year. And as you know, when we went to the Super Bowl in 2004, we all felt that same way. And it took us, it took this team years and years and years to rebuild to that point. And so that's the unfortunate thing about this, is that it's not easy to get to this game. Even this year, as good as this team was, it wasn't easy to get to the big game. And so that's why it's even more heartbreaking, because I know that it's going to be even more difficult next year to get back to this game. It's going to be harder. Every year, teams are different. Like you're saying, Fletcher Cox might be gone. This guy might be gone. That guy might be gone. And so it's going to be a tough road. And, I just hope that everyone understands that this team was really good, but this was only for this year. So next year is going to be a completely different team.
Mm-hmm. Look, it's as you know, it's a passing league, and it's all about the quarterbacks and all that. Jalen Hurts is the guy that gives me confidence. It's funny. Two guys that give me the most confidence, Jalen Hurts is one of them. The other is Howie Roseman, even more so than Nick Sirianni, because Howie Roseman has this magical way of like making the playoffs and then getting a top 10 pick. Like he still has to, like I never thought I'd say this, never think I'd give him this much credit, but damn, I give him a lot of credit for it. I do want to ask you real quick. Would you have gone the route of blitzing more in the second half of that Super Bowl? Just back to Jonathan Gannon, the scheme, the philosophy. Would you have blitzed more then in the second half, in the fourth quarter, maybe? What would you have done differently in that second half?
Me personally, as a former safety, and I've coached a little bit. I personally don't like to blitz. I don't care about blitzing. I don't like to play man in the red zone. There are certain situations where you have to do it. I'm not a huge fan of playing man in the red zone. And that's the reason why, is that there's so much stuff that can happen. Outside of that, it's not like I don't think that the defense as a whole played too bad. I just think in certain spots, the secondary, especially the linebackers in the middle of the field, played with really bad eye discipline, meaning they're dropping back into their zones, and there's guys, there's Kelsey running right behind you, going to the other side of the field, and you've got to understand what they're trying to do in certain situations. And so I don't necessarily dislike the game plan besides the man in red zone, but I do dislike the eye discipline. I do dislike the way the middle of the field was defended. You cannot drop back into the middle of the field as a linebacker or a nickel and keep your eyes strictly on Mahomes. As you've seen, like he can throw from any arm angle. If you're looking at him, you're done. And that's what I saw a lot. I saw guys just letting receivers go scot-free, tight ends go scot-free, and they're dropping back and their eyes are on Mahomes. Meanwhile, there's guys climbing and getting in open areas. So that was the frustrating part for me.
Understood. When it comes to that penalty at the end of the game on James Bradbury, my stance on it has been, look, there was other things the Eagles needed to take care of in that game. The least of my worries was the officiating in that game, unfortunately. But I thought it was a legit call. I questioned the time of the call. Do you make that call at that time in the game? What was your take on it?
There's no question it was holding. I don't think it was enough to impede the play. I don't think it was a catchable ball. So I wouldn't have made that call. I don't think that was the right call at that situation. It was frustrating. It was the right call, but I don't think it should have been made. Especially when for 4 quarters I saw Reddick just getting held left and right. I mean, it was ridiculous. He was getting held all the time. And that wasn't just him. It was everyone on the defensive front was getting held. And so, but you don't want to cry and say that, this and that. But I don't think I would have made that call. I don't think it was the right call.
All right. And lastly, I had to double check this because I was pretty sure you never played at the Vet. And then I went back and I'm like, you lucky SOB. You missed it by 1 year. 1 year. You were drafted in the year the Eagles started at the Link. So I have to ask you this, knowing that it's not the Link, what's the worst field you ever played on?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm gonna preface this by saying it has to be in the pros. You can't say some high school team, some college, whatever, some field you played on. Just some professional stadium. What's the worst you ever played on?
What was the was it the Coliseum where the Raiders used to play?
Oh, the Oakland County Coliseum. Yeah.
That one. That was a terrible. That was terrible with the sand in the middle of the field. That one was horrible. I hated Candlestick Park. Candlestick was terrible.
Oh my God.
The surface was atrocious.
Wow.
Those two are probably the worst stadiums I ever played in.
Okay. When you saw everyone slipping and sliding around, I would have to think, and tell me if I'm wrong, a pass rush would be more affected because of a bad field than pretty much almost anywhere else. Maybe running backs, and you saw them slipping around too. But I felt like the Eagles in their front 4 or 5 were unfortunately really taking off their game because of that field.
Yeah, it's really frustrating when I hear people say everyone played on the same field. And that's simply it. They do play on the same field. Before halftime, I'd never seen this before. It was a crew of about 15, 20 guys picking up all the divots and putting them in buckets and taking them off the field. Like, that's how bad it was at halftime. And so back to my original point, I feel like, yes, everyone's playing on the same surface, but defenders are at a disadvantage. Like, it's not even right. And this goes for the Chiefs defense as well. You, as a defender, you don't know where the play's going. Everything that you're doing, everything you're running and breaking is all off reaction. The offense, they know where they're going. They can prepare themselves to stop and the cut and the move. And so I think it's a complete disadvantage for all defensive players on a field like that. And it was just for an NFL game, for as much as they spent on that with $800,000 on that field, that was embarrassment in my opinion. I think that that should never, ever happen again. Hopefully that never happens again. That surface was ridiculous. I've never seen anything like that.
Last thing for you, Quintin Mikell of Q&A, former Eagles safety. How confident are you that this Eagles team with Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman, and many others, how confident are you that this team will be back in a Super Bowl next year?
Like I said before, it's not easy. It's going to be tough. And it also depends on who they bring in as the defensive coordinator. It looks like Sirianni is going to take over play calling, maybe with Brian Johnson, who I have a lot of confidence in. I think he's a tremendous coach, tremendous young coach. I think he's going to do a great job. So I think the offense will be fine. I'd like to see a more seasoned defensive coordinator coming in, maybe Lovie Smith or someone like that. Like, if they bring in Lovie Smith, that'd be amazing. And so if all the pieces come in, most of this team, this nucleus comes back, I think that they can challenge for, another spot next year.
Can we make any headlines? Can we make any news right now? Quintin Mikell, have you received a call to be the Eagles defensive coordinator? Can you confirm or deny a report? I'm just making it up. But in today's world, that's called reporting.
That would be amazing.
Have you gotten a call? Have you gotten a text? Have you been in touch with anyone? You answer the question.
I don't want that life, man. Those guys, they sleep in their offices. It's a rough life to be a coach, man. I'm not prepared for that right now. 4 kids.
That's a lot more. That's a lot more travel. That's no thanks, man. No bueno. No bueno. Quintin Mikell, when's the next Q&A I can listen to?
Looks like we're going to be recording on Thursday night. We had to take a little bit of a break from the Super Bowl hangover and, driving back. And so we're going to record, I think, Thursday night. And I think we should drop that on Friday morning. So look for that coming up, man. I'm sure it'll be great. Jason's always awesome. He's always got some great takes. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, the both of yous with your great takes. Of course, it's all part of the Inside the Birds empire, as we like to refer to it. Quintin Mikell, always great catching up with you. At the time that we tape this, it's Valentine's Day. So thanks for taking some time out of your busy night as well, my friend. Thank you.
All right, no doubt. Thanks, man.
Quintin Mikell joining us from Q&A Podcast. So you guys make sure you download and listen to that wherever you get your podcast. Thanks, Q.
All right, thank you.